Today, we're going to talk with my friend and colleague, Patrisse Cullors. She's an Afrofuturist, she's an abolitionist, a mother, an artist, and a scholar. She is one of the founders of Black Lives Matter, which has been at the forefront of media and covering injustice and speaking truth to power, making sure the names of victims of police brutality are centered and never forgotten. Mike Brown, Breonna Taylor, Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Keenan Anderson, and so many others who have fallen victim to a system Patrisse is working to not only defund, but abolish. People have been looking for Black voices in their leadership since October 7th. She has been at the center of those courageous conversations with folks from all sides. Families of hostages, billionaires, influential movement leaders, politicians, all looking for counsel, guidance on moving forward with love, empathy, and dignity. Patrisse has challenged and motivated me to move offline, to pick up the phone, to have conversations, to elevate beyond influence and into leadership and coalition building. I also want to acknowledge Patrisse for continuing to come forward as a community organizer in the name of being the focus of right-wing targeting, smear campaigns, the anti-woke militia coming for her and being after her. She continues to still show up, collaborate, and evolve, and those are the kinds of leaders we need today. And let me just say, as Niecy Nash said in her Emmy-accepted speech, we must continue to elevate the voices of Black women who are historically underheard but over-policed. So let's jump into it with Patrisse Cullors. Hi, Patrisse.
Hi.
How are you?
This morning I woke up better. I woke up with a lot more hope. The last few days were hard, but today I feel better.
Before we go into current events, I thought we could zoom out and talk a little bit about trauma and the role of trauma and everything that's going on right now. You're one of the few people that I've heard bring trauma work and the Body Keeps Score into activism, political activism, and humanitarian activism. Never has the word had more meaning, at least for me, thinking a lot about trauma and generational trauma. So where are you, given the work that you've done in the past, how are you thinking about trauma and the role of trauma as it relates to today?
It's a great question. I'll say that I think about this concept of trauma every day. It's a lens in which I look at the entire world, especially living in a country that is built on stolen land and stolen labor. My ancestors are the people who experienced one of the harshest moments in American history, which is chattel slavery, and that I believe all Black people, not just Black people in America, but Black people across the diaspora, have a collective grief, a collective trauma from that experience. And I think it shapes how we show up every single day. But I'll say something else, though, Moj, because trauma is one piece of this, but there's also this other piece that's called resilience. The whole reason why I'm alive or you're alive is because we're resilient as well. And so, yes, there is a ton of trauma. Trauma is going to happen even if we live in a system that is abolitionist. Trauma exists. Trauma is not the bad thing. Trauma isn't a bad thing. But what we do with our trauma, how we heal, how we respond, how we understand trauma, how we relate to our trauma is actually more important to me than the trauma itself.
I agree. I feel like why I'm special is because I value and love, I've learned to love my trauma. I think a lot about the Kintsugi ideology and the concept of being broken, and that's being a survivor of emotional, physical, sexual abuse, and being a brown, marginalized, non-binary human being trying to thrive in a system that wasn't created for me. I
Mhm.
think a lot about when people ask me why it is that I have such a zest for life. It's because of that resilience. And I agree that I think that it's only people who have found a way to thrive and heal through their trauma that are going to be able to help us today. Those are the
Right.
only people that I'm trusting and leaning into, are people who are able to own their hurt. I thought it was incredibly powerful, your share on New Year's Eve or day, where you shared where you were a year ago. It made me feel less alone for you to talk about your grief and suicidal thoughts.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, I've pretty much always been an open book. I valued vulnerability before I understood that that's what I was doing. That is not very Black. Um, Black families do not talk about private issues, including sadness or hurt or pain or, depression or suicidality. In fact, when I was a little girl, my mom used to train me before I left the house to remind me what I wasn't going to talk about, what I wasn't going to share about our family, because I just didn't understand the concept of not sharing. I was highly verbal. I was witnessing so much happening in the world, and I wanted to talk about it. So she'd say to me, Patrice, what are we not sharing when we leave the house? And I'd be like, we're not sharing that. We're poor. We're not sharing, kind of have a litany of things that we wouldn't share about what was happening in our home, which was largely about poverty and her own shame, being a single mother of 4 children and having to do so much on her own. And as I got older, and I really, appreciate my biological father who has passed now. It's been 14 years. He was the first adult to share with me his own trauma. He was the first adult to be accountable to how trauma had impacted him and our relationship. And I started to go to 12-step meetings with him when I was younger. And I was in these rooms, these AA rooms with grown ass men crying and talking about the terrible things they had done while they were using and the things that they wanted to heal from. And I wasn't scared of it. I actually was like, oh my God, thank God, adults who are being accountable. And it was the first time that I could put words and feelings to what I was so longing for and the people around me.
As someone who loves a good Al-Anon meeting, I agree. Um, One of the most powerful things my therapist shared with me over the past 90 days is that unresolved trauma turns into dangerous levels of narcissism.
Mhm.
And when I look around me, I am seeing a high voltage, high frequency level of shame.
Yes.
And people are doing some insane things right now because of their shame. And it's showing up as violence. And I think it's violence not just against others, but quite frankly, I think it's also violence against themselves, which is so painful to watch. People that I
Absolutely.
love taking their unprocessed shame and hurting themselves and hurting others. How do we even begin to have those conversations? Like, as you say, courageous conversations right now.
I think we start with the people who are willing to listen. I have a lot of great teachers and mentors, and one of them once said to me, I remember, and I was organizing on the bus as a youth member of the bus riders union, and I was came back from organizing, and I was like, nobody wanted to talk to me. I only talked to one person who wanted to listen to me. And my mentor said, well, that's the person you should be talking to.
Mhm.
Talk to the people who wanna talk to you. Hold space for the people who wanna listen. I know it because I've seen it in the last 22 years of community organizing and talking about trauma and resilience and, being an artist. I've realized that there are more people who want to talk about things differently than there are not. The unfortunate role of the internet, which we'll probably get to in this conversation, or social media, is that much of that is bots, channeled by governments and systems with nefarious intent. But if you really sit with people, if you have the conversations with people who are interested in a new way, they just need to be sat with. And sometimes sitting with people in their trauma and just holding that space and tension goes a long way. And people eventually and will shift. It's very challenging though, the time we're in because we have these places, these social media platforms that amplify very quickly um, hate, violence, uh, vitriol, and creates a divisiveness that I have never seen in all the years of doing the work that I've done. So I think we're up against a different beast, but I still think the answer is the same, which is like we sit with the people who want to sit with us, and I think there are more people who do want to sit with us. I think it's going to take more time now because people are kind of like in their positions. But if we can release ourselves from our political positions for a moment, which is how you and I met. You know, we had a courageous conversation the first time we met. And we sat in that courageous conversation, and it was quite powerful. It shifted the both of us. And that's the point of being alive, I believe, and being in relationship to each other is to be able to offer something. We both have offerings. We all have offerings. And for me, the offerings have to be for the betterment of all living beings. I am not interested in the offering of violence. I'm only interested in the offering of healing, transformation, restoration, care, and love. I think that is the evolution of human beings.
Ugh, so hard to do right now because everyone is really committed to being right and just. And um, when this all first started happening, my ask of everyone was to be in the question and to write no governments any blank checks. And all anyone has done that I can see is boldly, strongly sit behind their statements and opinions. And they are doing something that in my household was like the most, like you would get smacked in the head for doing it, which is writing a government a blank check. You know, as an Iranian American, the first thing that they taught you was you trust no government, not your own, not American, not European. You trust no one because it was explained to me at a very young age that countries and governments, particularly, are businesses and they are created to monetize citizenship, and the cost of that was patriotism, and sometimes that patriotism created injustices and violence. And so for me, like, this has been super simple. Like, I'm like, I don't really trust anyone and I'm going to just ask a lot of questions,
That's right.
but it's been fucking insane
Yeah.
to see everyone rolling out with flags and blank checks for those flags and not even remotely interested to ask a question. And so, as I find myself in the minority alongside you of people who want to sit down and ask questions and question governments, um, and I believe that we need a new bench of leadership and we need the internet and the influencers to sit down and we need coalition builders and leaders and futurists to stand up. And so, as the person who built and engineered and created a movement that was the greatest social justice civil rights movement we've seen since the civil rights movement, Black Lives Matter, everyone and their mother's coming to you. Are they not?
Yeah, and I've talked to a lot of people that I never thought I'd talk to in my life.
Tell us about it.
Well, I think there's a number of things that have happened for me personally that help inform why I make the choices that I make. Number one, we are living in a time where the art and science of community organizing largely doesn't exist. We live in a time of influence, which means that you have to have the most polarizing, most intense hot take about a thing because that's what gives you influence on social media. Asking people to sit down and talk and be in a courageous conversation is not influential on social media. That's not what people are largely interested in. It's not how we've been trained. There's a culture that we've been trained in the last decade, and I wanna be honest, I've contributed that to that culture. Not necessarily because I was trying to create divisiveness, but I believed in a thing, and that thing was the most important thing for me to share on social, and for most of my time on social media, that's what I shared about. I wasn't saying let's have courageous conversations and sit with each other. That didn't happen until really the last couple years when I started to notice the way social media was being used against us and how we weren't able to see through the weeds. And I was like, wait, we must slow down. And I went back to my community organizing roots because what community organizers believe, we believe that we meet the people where they're at. You meet a person where they're at, and then you bring them into and help transform them into a new belief system. But you don't shout at them, you don't yell at them, you don't shame them, you don't humiliate them. You bring them into a new way of understanding what their reality is. For example, when I was organized into movement, it was at a youth gathering. Some amazing older adults came to a youth gathering. They were bringing people in to come fight transit racism in Los Angeles County, not sexy. And they showed us a little video clip of a bunch of women, mostly women of color, that were on the bus organizing people to fight transit racism. If you're a bus rider, you have the right to a first class transit system. And the video was so persuasive. I was like, "Oh, I didn't think about racism, and poverty at the intersection of transportation. Duh." And I sat with those organizers, and they didn't yell at me for things I probably said that was 17 years old that were probably out of control. They didn't, shame me. They just kept talking to me. They kept sitting with me. They kept bringing me in, and eventually I'd become one of the lead members of the organization. Eventually I became staff, and we've lost that. We have lost the art of sitting with another human being where they're at and supporting them in their transformation. Mind you, that was not everybody. Remember what I said at the beginning. Me Not everybody's interested in that, but a lot of people are. A lot of
Yep.
people do not want to live how they're living right now. So for me, I think it's been most important in these last 90 days, it's been since October 7th, is sitting with people and meeting them where they're at and not shaming them and humiliating them, but asking them, are you willing to engage in a different conversation? Are you willing to listen to a different conversation? And I'm also asking myself, am I willing to? Am I ready to? And I think I have largely, and it's not been popular.
Well, I mean, you have pivoted on a very controversial statement that you once made years ago around Israel, right? I mean, that is monumentally huge and courageous, and I admire that about you. I think that that's um incredibly, well, it makes me trust you,
Hmm.
right? It makes me trust you because I think I have a real challenge with people that can't be open to renegotiate things that they once thought or said. I've thought a lot of things that I was wrong on in the past, and that learning has been fundamental for me. I wanted to also mention, a couple years ago when everyone and their mother was being canceled, myself included, yourself included, every female founder that I knew, every female activist that I knew, anyone of color that had done anything interesting or important, the media went on a craze, um, just auditing and tearing people down, cancel culture at an all-time high. And I was lucky enough to come across this incredible professor. Her name is Professor Loretta Ross, and she had written an article that was about calling people in versus calling them out.
Mhm.
And I've spent a lot of time reading her work, taking her workshops, listening to her, and through her coaching and mentorship, was able to create, a nonprofit in the beauty and wellness industry to bring in more diversity and inclusion where we got non-Black people to mentor and invest in up and coming Black founders, both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs. And I'm amazed that some of this work is available to all of us, these YouTube videos, these TED Talks, these works, these elders, these mentors, these guides,
Yeah.
where in a moment where society is actually so, I wish we were just lost.
Yeah.
Being lost would be fine. We're something else. It's like, actually, we're dangerous.
That's
Why are
right.
we not, as a society, leaning into the elders who have been here in some version of this before? Someone like a Loretta Ross, in my mind, people like Gabor Mate, like, where are the people? Where are the grown-ups, Patrisse? Like, where are they? Like, who's home right now? Like, I feel like a latchkey kid, and I'm like, hello? Like, is anyone gonna come out here and tell us what to do?
Well, I think some people are, like you said, Gabor Mate, and
But
some
nobody
people are
likes what
happy.
he's saying, right? Like, he's a
Right.
anti-Semitic, even though this man was born in Auschwitz in the Holocaust, he is not, I was happy to see that he's sitting down. Some rabbis have introduced, or he's coming to speak at with some rabbis this week. And I'm happy to see a lot of my friends are going to attend because I think his books are actually brilliant.
Absolutely. Well, I think what we're experiencing right now is a collective trauma response, which often, the trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, dissociate. And we're experiencing a crew of people who are um unable to see it as a trauma response and to reshift and reevaluate. And all that does is create more trauma. I think now is the time for us to collectively decide uh, if we're going to rely on our trauma responses as the way that we respond to traumatic experiences, or if we're going to dig in deeper and really push for a new way. I'm a big fan of generative somatics. One of my good friend Stacey Haynes helped develop this somatics practice, which really looks at the body as a place of generativity, but also looks at the body as like we have these shapes and we all process our life through these shapes. And so if your shape has been, for the whole of your life, it's been to be a frozen shape for your protection and safety, it is very, very difficult to move out of that shape if you don't have a new way, if you don't
Mm,
have a new understanding of what's possible. And it's scary. It is so scary to change your shape because that's the thing that's protected you. And
mm,
so, how do we collectively create a new shape? We need a new culture. We need a new culture on the left because honestly, the left and progressive movements have always changed and shaped history. If the progressive movement didn't exist, we would still have chattel slavery.
mhm.
But the progressive movement is also in a collective shape, which is fight. It fights, it fights, it fights because that's what we've done to protect ourselves. And we should always keep the shape we've had because it helps us. But if it's the only shape we have, it can actually destroy us. And we're in a moment right now where I believe our progressive movement and the left at large is really eating itself alive and it's
Mhm.
destroying itself because it's not willing to be in another shape. And there's multiple things happening at once right now, too. There's multiple things happening at once, and we have to be able to respond, not react. Another part of my book, be responsive to these things, sit with these things, be in community. And it's messy and it's going to take time and it's not going to happen overnight. And we have to understand that.
So, what you're talking about in terms of the physical shape resonates with me tremendously. I had top surgery 2 years ago, and Roya would always say to me, "You should have the top surgery because the world projects on you ideas and thoughts because you're always hunched over, covering up what you're ashamed of."
Mm,
And she's correct. It's
mhm,
been insane how much lighter and sweeter and more open people are with me because I'm like shoulders back and my neck up because I'm not this this old shape.
mhm,
Um and when I got my top surgery, I thought it was for the physicality, but what it really was to cement a non-binary way of being on the inside, which been
mhm,
the biggest gift of my entire life. Like, I don't think I love anything more about what I've done for myself than that, which is
mm.
the ability to be non-binary because it's given me the ability to have like this new shape
Yep.
that before I was really stuck in. And so I've been thinking a lot about how everyone's really stuck in their shape, stick in their binary, and I'm feeling sad for them. I've said this to you, and I guess this is like a controversial thing to say, but I happen to think the only way out of this is to call on queer Black leadership and Black leadership and minority leadership because you need incredibly empathetic, deep feeling children who are now adults with skill sets to help us feel our way through this. We're not going to be able to punch or blow or whir our way through this moment. No
Mhm.
amount of missiles and bombs are going to bring peace on earth.
Yep.
It's a we need a spiritual um, we need a spiritual path forward. I think we're in the middle of a political crisis, but also spiritual. But I do think, in fairness to everyone who is acting fucking insane, I'm going to acknowledge them because I grew up as an Iranian American immigrant. So I was very present to images of the Islamic Republic lynching and hanging and murdering its own people. And that was something that was very present for me. And the next time I saw and felt that was police and police state sanctioned violence to Black people and minorities in this country. And so these very visceral experiences have been present for the entirety of my life. But since October 7th, there's a real skill set around what we know to be wrong domestically, but there's been an awakening to extremism and fundamentalism, both in the East and West, unlike anything we have ever seen. And I've been, um, I don't know if it's compulsively, but feverishly sending you
Mhm.
content about how the East has essentially hijacked the left. And
Mhm.
this is like a controversial statement. It gets me called an imperialist, a colonizer, get called all these names when I say this stuff.
Yeah.
Um, because there's not a good amount of vernacular language around it yet. But
Yeah.
something's in the water, Patrice. Something's up. Something is off.
Well, yeah,
Something
I
is
mean,
like something is off right now. And it's not just that America sucks and the West sucks. Like there's
yeah.
also some other people really sucking.
Ex Well, I think it's actually really important for us to identify, um, violence, vitriol, um, punishment, revenge, wherever it is. I'm an abolitionist, we talk about this all the time. I'm an abolitionist, and I believe my belief system is about care, love, transformation, healing. I believe that we live in a carceral culture, and it's not just here in this country, it's a global phenomenon. This idea of punishment and revenge as a way to deal with social ills, but really it's a way to punish what we don't like, what we don't love, what we hate. It's a form of punishment. And um, if our values as a body, if our values as a collective is about the values of care, about love, about transformation, about abolition, we have to look at every single government that is using punishment and revenge as their central through line. And if we're not willing to do that, if we are not willing to do that, then we have a problem. If we're only willing to call out the West for its issues as a progressive movement, and then we glorify other countries that are actually killing queer people and women, we have a problem. And so, our conversations off this podcast have been interesting for me as a human being because it's really pushed me to really think about what are my values. I think this moment is pushing everybody to think about what are our values, even when we're under attack, even when we deal with the worst parts of humanity. Are we shifting our values? Um, I have a problem and I get real confused when people one day we're all about peace and the next all about war because it benefits them maybe. That's frightening. That means that our value set isn't really at its core. It means that it means that any government can actually like push us to the edge into our trauma response and then get the people to be riled up around it. And I think we got to be smarter than these governments. We got to be smarter than these governments because we are pawns. We are pawns to a much larger war, and it's time that we get smarter.
Well, from your lips to God's ears, because we need help. I am relieved that there are people like yourself who've been staunchly laser focused on the injustices of the West. And I am grateful for all of the work that you have done and do and will do. I am here to be your student and your mentee because my people are actually fucking suffering at the hands of, in my mind, the evilest regime there is existing on the face of the earth. Um, and I say this, and people are so angry with me about it because America does what it does because we're capitalists, and capitalism is just hungry, 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 and it's just got to feed that hippo, and it just finds all kinds of ways to do that, and it's goods and war and technology and all the things that we do. But there is another superpower out there, um, Russia, Iran, Islamic Republic specifically, that operates in Syria and Yemen and um, Hamas and Gaza and Hezbollah, Lebanon, Africa, that has been systematically killing, murdering, raping, sticking women in Afghanistan in prison for the rest of their lives because they are victims of sexual assault. Um, and when I first came into the Women Life Freedom work, nothing had moved me as much and as deeply since BLM. And I thought, what an amazing opportunity that Women Life Freedom could be the next evolution of this, because Women Life Freedom is really about a social equity, a healing, a wellness, centering women and feminine and mothers at the center of culture, Kurdish people, Baha'i people, Jewish people. Um, but we're never going to be able to do that if we're glorifying them because they hate the West. Like, so we're all stuck in this binary of choosing sides. You're either team East or team West. And so, where do people like me and you sit that see all the players on this chess field, like on this chessboard?
We need a new team. We need a new way. We need a third way, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth way. We need something different. We need to build something different. When I was attacked by right wing media and then also inside of our movement, I just kept thinking, what if we really believed in abolition as a movement? Um, I questioned where were all the abolitionist healers, to help coordinate something different. But part of the problem is we still collectively have a ton of anti-black racism and a bunch of misogynoir, and we witnessed it with Claudine Gay. Um, we have to be willing to change. We have to get out of our shape, our old shape, and build new shape. That's what I'm trying to do. It's what I'm most interested in doing is building a new shape. I think our the existence of I think this is a planetary fight. It's not just a human fight. This is a fight about our planet, the survival of it. And if we can't build a new shape, I think we're in bad shape if we can't build a new shape. And so I'm very optimistic, which is fascinating to me given everything that I've seen and been through and experienced. But I'm optimistic. I do believe in our ability to build new shapes. I've seen it in me and in other people. um, I think I've also seen it at the collective scale when BLM started. That was not the collective shape. In fact, I was, shouted at, yelled at, and I saw over years that shrink, and that shrink, and us build a new collective shape to really talk about anti-Black racism and the role of police violence. There was a time where the news didn't cover police violence. There was no beat for police violence, and then all of a sudden there was a whole entire beat for it. And I when I sit with people who are, use the language of the BLM that we've created, I don't want to say we created, but vernacular that we platformed around, like, thinking about yourself and your identities and how they impact, the people around you. That's all 10 years of labor. So we're in this place right now where we're watching the rise of fundamentalism and extremism around the globe. This is a global phenomenon. Did not start with Trump, although he amplified it in this country. And it's going to take decades long work to undo that and
Mm.
to build a new way for all of us to be able to actually be inside of care and healing and love. I don't know if I'll see, abolitionist institutions in my lifetime, but I want to help create the roadmap so that they can be developed.
Well, I meet people all the time that tell me they're an abolitionist because of you. And asked you the other day, can I be an abolitionist and a capitalist? Um, but I want to ask you, what does it feel like when the words that you helped platform both through your personal work and BLM are now being platformed by groups like the Islamic Republic, how much they love BLM. They are in solidarity with BLM. There are murals about George Floyd all throughout Iran. I remember when um, Nipsey Hussle was murdered. The former president of Iran tweeted his condolences to his family. I mean, I think people really are misinformed around how much um, that regime loves and reveres and stands with Black American struggle and BLM. But did you even? I know that I shared this with you, and you were shocked. You were floored when I started to send you these murals and tweets and articles, and how much of it is in all of their sermons. Like, well, how does that feel?
First of all, I had no idea. I know that, BLM has been um, adopted around the globe. Um, I didn't know that the Islamic Republic was using it as a way to build solidarity, both with Black Americans, but you've also named inside of on the continent as well, in Africa. It's confusing.
Even
Um,
for me, like I'm literally like, wait, like, am I?
because it's like, there's something about being seen that also creates, like, such a, like, there's something about, like, on the one hand, a violent regime that's killing women and queer people, and then it's like, but we love BLM, and you're like, wait,
No,
how?
like I'm 100% positive if you wanted to go there, they would like host you.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's a trip.
That's a trip. And it's the contradiction of of
I mean, because you know what they did to Massa Amini and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Iranian women specifically. I mean, because,
yeah.
I won't shut up about it, but I knew you knew before, but I know you overstand now.
I do, and what it makes me do, it makes me wanna do is, like, be in more conversation with Iranian people specifically, and makes me wanna
Like, would
be
you sit down with the supreme leader?
probably not, just like I wouldn't sit down with Trump. I wouldn't let him have that photo op.
Mhm.
Um, but I do wanna sit down with Iranian people and have
Yeah.
more of, like, these dialogues around, like, how do you understand? How does it land in your body? Like, how are we supposed to understand this? Because for me, it's like, I think one of the biggest reasons, and this is like as someone who's pretty new to the conversation, but I think one of the biggest reasons, because we've talked about this, that that the people of the US and sort of the broader left isn't like in the streets about what's happening in Iran is because it's mostly women and queer people.
Mhm. That's right.
I really
And
believe that.
minorities, right? It's
Mhm.
Baluchi, it's Kurdish,
Yeah, and people don't
Jewish.
really understand that piece though, like, but like
Yeah, like, you didn't know that there are people of color in Iran.
mhm. Yeah, and I think there's just what I will say the West has done a really good job at is just, like, not enough information. We do not
Mm,
know. We don't have a critical analysis about Iran, let alone the whole of the Middle East. We don't have that,
yeah.
and so it makes people just be like,
Mhm.
that's the terrible stuff that happens over there, and we're just gonna pull back." And I think if anything in this moment that has, like, opened my eyes, it's like, "Oh, we all need to be asking way more questions about the US's role and
Mhm.
funding of all of these extremist and fundamentalist groups and countries that are at the helm of so much violence." Like, we need to be questioning that, and there's just not enough collective questioning.
I believe, and I've always believed this, that if we don't solve the issues of the most marginalized people on the planet, that those issues and those pains and those traumas become pain bodies and they butterfly effect all over the world. And when the seventh happened, I was one of those people that was not surprised and had been anticipating this.
Yeah.
That the East has become so emboldened with a radical ideology that it wanted to flex its muscle to show what is possible. And in my opinion, they have orchestrated the most radical, brilliant, choreographed, practiced social media, digital media, traditional media, cultural war I have ever seen. I have never been more terrified and impressed with an organization in my life because I not only believe that they're not just around the corner, but I believe that they're inside, and I believe that they're actually eating us up alive because
Mhm,
they are geniuses at propaganda warfare. And this isn't just about Iran anymore. This is a war between the West and the East and
mhm,
radicalism on both sides, but we're human beings stuck in the middle. And so we now end up where the first Black president of Harvard
mhm,
is forced to resign in some part because of her poor handling of anti Semitism on college campus. And in my opinion, because of radical racism that was then launched against her in the form of calling her everything from the most valuable member of Hamas to a plagiarist to a fraud to a DNI tokenized hire. I think this week has actually been the most awful of this entire conflict for
mhm.
me. This is where I have seen the fracture happen at a depth that I'm not sure we can come back from.
Yeah, I knew it was gonna happen. I saw it coming, and I was
Same,
texting you. I was like,
same. I saw
um,
those as soon as I saw all that content coming out about where this was all going and from the mouths of some of the big content creators you and I have spoken of, there was a lot of content about how DNI was enabling Islamicism and radicalism and anti-Semitism. And fast forward, here we are. And so, should she be held accountable for how the Jewish community feels? Yes. But is this what being held accountable means? Is this the right thing for society?
no, it's deeply personal for me as another Black woman who's been in high power and high levels of leadership, who is also taken down by right-wing media, and knowing it was a campaign, a well-calculated campaign against my leadership, and seeing it happen again. And you said earlier, it's happened over and over again to female founders. At this point, everybody is should be well aware that what happened to Claudine Gay had nothing to do with anti-Semitism, although lots of Jewish folks felt vindicated by the resignation. But the people who led it are anti-Semites. The people
That's
who
what the irony of this is, right?
exactly.
Because the number one comment I've heard from my friends is, "Where are the Black people? We were there, we stood by them at BLM, we marched with them with Martin Luther King."
Mhm.
Historically, Black and Jewish people and queer people have been the trifecta that move forward progress, feminism, gay rights, D&I programs, affirmative action. And these three groups are not friends right now.
Yeah,
We're not even not friends. I would say you and I are one of the few people that are our friends with
yeah.
everyone in the middle. Like, where do we go from here? Because I don't think Jewish people want to hear that she was fired. I put up a post that shared that white nationalists had spent, millions and millions of dollars on this campaign against her. And my DMs were filled with unsavory comments about um, the status of Black women not being necessarily marginalized, which was shocking to me. But that also she deserved it, right? She deserved it. I don't understand why we're justifying her being discredited as an experienced, qualified professional. I definitely don't agree with her being described as a terrorist. She is not a terrorist, and she is not a member of Hamas. I'm dismayed that people that I know paid for media and marketing against her to um and people I know who like openly reshared that content, like with no fear that there would be a blowback for that. Where are, like, 2 years ago everyone would be terrified to do something like that.
I think this question around what do we do now, um, I don't have a lot of answers to that other than being in deep conversation with people and showing up and listening and talking and expressing from my value system. I am anti-war. I am anti-violence, period. Um, it's not what I believe in, and there's a whole legacy of that, of people who are anti-war, anti-violence. But it's sad, Moj. I'll just be honest. It's very, very sad. And I believe that we are allowing a right-wing agenda to co-opt conversations about anti-Semitism.
Just call it what it is. It's not a beyond right wing agenda. What is it? I think it's supremacy.
Oh yeah,
I think
when
it's
I say right wing,
supremacy.
I mean supremacist. I mean a white supremacist
Mhm.
agenda. That's how I understand right wing in this country. The right wing
Yes.
exists everywhere, but yeah, it's a white supremacist agenda to co-opt anti Semitism. And unless we take a step back, everybody, unless we take a step back, that co optation is going to land us in a very bad place in November.
If you were giving Dr. Claudine Gay advice that day, in addition to the advice she's been given to her lawyers, what advice would you have given her?
So it's a good question. I think number one, like, I hate that part of what happened was having to get advice on how to just respond to the impact trauma was having on human beings. So I would have just asked Claudine first, what do you feel? What's in your heart about this issue right now? What do you feel like you would want to say to the Jewish community aside from the legalese of it all? And I promise you, as another black queer woman, I bet you she would have said something wholly different that she wasn't trained to say, which was, I'm sorry, it's scary. What happened on October 7th was horrendous. You know, she's now said it in the New York Times, in her New York Times piece, and I will fight like hell to make sure anti-Semitism is not on this campus, and we should come together, like, and create a committee about what it means to have free speech on this campus and what it means for people who are pro-Palestinian to have their right to speak and what it means for people who are Jewish to have their right to speak. Let's sit and that's leadership, right? Like, let's sit and have these conversations about what's possible on this campus that is Harvard. That's like what I would have said. I think the way that all of those presidents responded were from a place of probably I couldn't imagine what they were under, the pressure they were under. And knowing the party that brought them there. And, you know, you never know what one thing will spin into.
There are, at this point, equivalent to 2 nuclear bombs that have been dropped in Gaza. There are north of 11,000 dead, unalived, maimed children. There's amputations with no antibiotics, anesthesia. There are 50,000 women who are going to give birth in this parking lot of grief and sorrow and hell. And the US government is funding this. And there is no ceasefire, end of this endless war in sight.
Yeah. Um, I visited Palestine and Israel in 2015. I saw the checkpoints. I saw the literal stealing of people's homes. I saw the suffering. I also met with so many people, not just Palestinians. I met with Israelis, I met with Israeli Palestinians who were also against what was happening in 2015, that wanted something different from their governments. This idea that there isn't nuance on the land is false. I witnessed it. I watched the nuance. I met with human rights organization led by Israeli people, led by Palestinian people. I met Afro-Palestinians, um, and I'm so grateful I got to do that trip to have more information about this moment. And I think, you know, what we're witnessing right now, especially for Black people, I was talking to a good friend of mine, and she was like just crying for days and days. And I was like, it's our trauma, it's our collective trauma. We've tapped into a pain source that is almost endless. And we have to witness it 24/7 because social media allows for us to witness this suffering and pain and trauma. And my government that I helped get Biden elected and Harris elected. I was a part of that team, begrudgingly, to be honest with you, but I didn't want to see Trump. And now the leadership of our government is not they're not good leaders right now.
That's
You
right.
have thousands and thousands of people saying, "Don't use our tax dollars this way." Call
Millions.
ceasefire.
Millions of people.
Millions of people. Yes.
Millions of people. In fact, I would argue to say billions of people around the world do not support this response. Doesn't mean that we
Yes.
don't support a response.
Yeah. And I think this response is a response that it really is steeped in punishment and
Mhm.
revenge. It's a response that is not about healing, transformation, and reconciliation. I think a lot about Nelson Mandela and when he came home and became president of South Africa and and went and did the truth and reconciliation um, ceremonies where he brought people who were a part of the apartheid government and other people who were impacted by it and had them sit together and they were incentivized to be a part of a healing process so they could move forward because they knew that they were going to be on that land together forever, that no one was going anywhere. And we are seeing the worst parts of humanity right now. We are seeing very, very, very few leaders really show up for this moment, especially our leaders in government. And it's depressing, Moj. It's fucking depressing because I know we could be doing more. I know we could be different. I know that Biden and Harris could be doing more and they're choosing not to. And it's a really depressing thing to be in a election year knowing that we only have 2 viable parties. I don't even this part right here, I don't have answers to, I haven't thought about it enough, but I don't even know what to tell people about November because it's just so unsavory what we're witnessing.
I mean, I don't even know if we're going to make it to November.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like we're about to implode from grief and anger. And every day wake up and it's one algo hostages, one algo grieving dead families, one algo IDF soldiers, one algo Iranians in Iran, one algo our domestic issues with shootings and violence. It is, I don't even know if we're going to make it to November. Sometimes people ask me about the election, and I'm like, I don't really even know that that's like, are we going to even make it to there? Because it it feels like the world cannot hold the trauma and the pain of what they are seeing in Gaza.
Yeah.
They cannot.
It's too
This is
much.
intolerable.
Yeah, it's
This
too much.
is this is this is like intolerable.
Yeah, it's too much.
And every day I'm like, would this stop if they give back the hostages? I don't think it's going to stop if they give back the hostages. But we don't know because I would really like them to give back the hostages because they're
I wanna say in our last couple minutes together that there's also been a false binary between the hostages and the ceasefire, and I
Mhm.
wholeheartedly disagree. We could do both. We have to do both. It is absolutely necessary to do both, and that is, like, my abolitionist value speaking. We are not picking, we have to do both, and the only hope I have is in my abolitionist belief system right now, and my prayer is that people will really sit with those values and really show up for those values right now.
Uh, I don't think they're going to. So how are we going to make that happen?
Well, it took 10 years for BLM. It took a decade. I think I think we can do it now. I'm gonna have to just challenge that, like, 'cause here's what I learned in early organizing, if I don't believe, then they won't believe.
I believe. I feel
Great.
like we have to stop what's happening in Gaza. We must.
Mm, yeah,
Because we're punishing people that I mean, these are not this was not it actually doesn't even matter who started it at this point. It's
that's
irrelevant. What
Yeah.
matters is that it is it's killing them and it's killing us. We are dying at the same time. Like our humanity, our respectability, our morality, our
Yes.
spirituality, our ability to be a community. Nobody's having it. Nobody, we are, this will have, this will literally morally, spiritually, and financially bankrupt us.
That's exactly right, and I will also say that it doesn't actually keep Jewish people more safe, and it doesn't keep, Palestinians or Arab folks or Muslims more safe. Like, this actually creates more unsafety for everybody. This doesn't create more safety because this is happening in the name of, quote, "safety," but it doesn't actually create more safety. And, when we were at the height of BLM in 2020 and people were asking us about abolition and what about this and what about that, we said, like, hey, there's all this work you have to do before you have an abolitionist society. There's all this healing that you have to do, all this transformation that you have to do, all this um, care that you have to have. We have to start there. Do we care about all human beings or just some human beings? What is it?
I'm going to stop here and speak more directly about our desperate need for coalition building. As a united front, we must stand in protection of our democracy, the one thing that's barely holding us together. If we want real change, we're going to have to take back power in our local, national, and political spheres. We need to breathe life into public office, and it starts with young people challenging and taking back our communities. We can't just keep blaming these old people. We need to actually understand that we ourselves are responsible for shaping this democracy and making it work. Super duper sick of innovative, creative people discrediting themselves, brainwashing themselves to believe that somehow they are not qualified to be in public life, to run for office, to be heads of companies and governments and various different institutions, because we are literally seeing the largest failure in leadership we have ever seen in our lives. And these people are all pedigreed. They went to the great schools. They did the right things. Their resumes are amazing. And look, they're garbage. So why not you? I would really like everyone else who wants to get out there to take these roles over, to get up and do the simple, most effective thing, which is fucking believe in yourself. Please, we need futurists. We need new leaders. We need coalition. We need to retire these people. We need to end the era of influence, and we need to lean into coalition and build our communities again.
I want to live in a world where restorative justice is our first and only option to make that work. And I fundamentally I do not believe that we cannot rehabilitate, and heal these wounds. I like just don't believe it. I think it is entirely possible if a new bench of leadership comes forward. My request of everyone that has coalition building skills, that wants and is focused and non-negotiable on peace, to come forward. We have to come forward right now.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come forward right now. You are going to come forward right now. And I think it is time for politicians and influencers to sit down. Well, I know this will be the first of many conversations that we have to have on this topic.
Yes, and I think the last thing I'll say is we have seen terrible, terrible times before, and we've come out of them as humans. And it took a lot of leadership, but it took a lot of strength, and it took a lot of coming together. And so, for people listening to this, like, I know you're suffering. I know that it's deep, deep sorrow and trauma that you're in right now. And be in community, be around the people you love and love and trust you. Take care of yourself. Like, it's all we can do. Like, we have our bodies, we can take care of our bodies to the best of our ability. And whatever spiritual practice you have, be inside of it right now because we need it. We need the like peace loving healing energy that is like so necessary for times like this.
And I would add, if you find yourself with deeply radical homicidal thoughts, that deleting your social media apps is medicine. And I
Correct.
find that if you have gotten to a point where you can justify the seventh as resistance and what's happening in Gaza as defense, it is time to delete these apps because you have not sat down with a Jewish person, a Palestinian person, an Arab person, an Iranian person, a human being, a rabbi, a friend. You have not sat down with people to look them in the eye. Because I think it's very difficult to want someone to be unalive when you're sitting with them.
That's right.
Like that's really, it's not easy. I find that people are confronted to the point where they walk back.
Hmm.
So I think it's time for us to sit, as you said, and I've been sitting with many people, and I will continue to sit with many people. And I think intersectionality is the only way out of here right now. Non-binary intersectionality.
A shame.
I love you, Patrisse. I think you are such a gift. I think you're so beautiful. You are so wise. You are so important. I look up to you. I respect you. And I am happy to see that in this moment of crisis, everyone I know that is influential is looking for your guidance and leadership. And we have all been anxiously waiting for you to think about what you want to say. And I'm grateful that you sat down with me. And so I pray for your health and joy and wellness.
As I do for you and your whole family, because y'all deserve it.
Thank you.